Hello, everybody. If anybody is actually here yet, I know I say it every time, but it's that point that happens at the beginning of the talk where you don't really know if anybody is watching or not. And so you kind of blab on about lots of things, not really knowing if anybody's watching you. I just realized I'm on the wrong internet connection. So I'm going to try to switch without anything shifting here. So bear with me, everybody who may be watching. You may see a little bit of a dip in the video, but then it should hopefully improve. So can everybody still hear me and see me? If you could please give me a yes or a no, that would be really great because I just changed internet connections on us. Okay, so I wanted to make sure I didn't lose anyone. Okay, so if I did, if I did, you wouldn't say, good, everybody can still see me. Good. So just to kind of explain what we're going to do here tonight, and I do this every time we do it. So if you've been here before and seen it, you probably know what I'm going to say next. This is not really a forum to come on and have me interpret your chart for you. Okay, I'll explain why. And I do this every time too, but it's worth repeating. Generally, if you spout off like a few planetary combinations in your chart, I can only reply to that. And when I reply to that, I'm not taking your whole horoscope into consideration. So chances are the information I'm giving you is not as accurate as it could be. So it's never wise, I feel, to just have somebody interpret things based upon 2 or 3 planets in your chart and where your ascendant is. The best way to do those types of interpretations are full horoscope interpretations. And yes, sadly enough, that is something that generally you have to pay an astrologer for. But if you have general astrological questions, that's something I'm here to answer. Okay. I'm not don't really have any predictions to give for Cancer rising. And the reason for that being is I haven't just looked at the chart just for Cancer rising lately, because we have to consider what it's transiting to your chart as well. It would just be such a vast generalization. Okay. I do general transit videos though. So if you go watch some of my transit videos, even though they're not ascendant specific, they're applicable to everyone. So if you want some information along those lines, I would point you in that particular direction. So anybody with any general astrological related questions that they have to ask, like how things function in astrology, please pardon me, I'm going to take a drink. I've been talking a lot today. Those questions are more than welcome, things along those lines, okay? So I'll probably say this a few times further. I have 2 classes that are starting this week. For those of you who may be interested, there is a course that starts this Sunday on how to work with planetary yogas. It involves a mathematical formula that helps you to more accurately, not more judgely, to more accurately judge the level of fruits to which planetary yogas will perform. In addition to that, we're going to cover many of the best planetary yogas to work with on this course. It's a 44-week webinar course. You can register by trimester or by payment in full. I'm going to mention it again in more depth here in a little bit when more people arrive, but I just thought I'd bring it up while I'm waiting for people to ask their first questions, which you're more than welcome to do. So there's the link to the course should anybody have interest. Okay. Okay, so here's another thing too. It becomes obvious after a while if you're asking questions astrologically and really you're asking questions about your own chart. Okay, so I do know when people are doing that because it's pretty obvious. So do understand if you like kind of put a question over here in the chat window, you're only going to get a very general answer, which is not going to necessarily be the most accurate answer. Right. And in this particular instance, in regards to what somebody has put in the window, what will be the result of Sun, Mercury, and North Node in Virgo sign in 10th house? A lot of that relates to the strength of Mercury Well, Mercury in Virgo, well, Mercury would be strong, so that's good, right? But there can be the potential to be prone to doubt and equally a hard time identifying the path a person should take. In other words, the person suffers from somewhat of an identity crisis, and they tend to see their life in terms of if I want to achieve something, I have to work hard. Well, hard work doesn't always return reward. Sometimes taking things easy and the more relaxed approach is what returns rewards. So the person is having to learn a balance between surrender and also engaging with their destiny, so to speak, but finding a balance between those two things. But as they do so, they're having to figure out who they are. Generally, people with Rahu Sun connections, someone in their life has told them who they were going to be their whole life, like maybe sometimes an overbearing parent who says, when you grow up, you're going to be this. When you grow up, you're going to be that. And then the person grows up and they don't know who they are because they've always been told who they were going to be. And they've never had a chance to identify with themselves, right? The person may doubt themselves a little bit in business, things along those lines. But those are just some generalizations, okay? Mercury conjunct Sun in Cancer between 5 to 12 degrees. Mercury should be combust in that level, yes. Okay. Any other general questions that people might have while we're waiting for some more people to arrive? Please feel free to just ask away. Okay, I may have to pause every once in a while here and there. I've got the headset on tonight because my voice is a little strained tonight, so I may have to take a drink every now and then. Okay, so while we're waiting for people to ask some more questions, as I said, there are two classes that are starting this week. One of those is actually going to be a weekly webinar series. I mean, they're both weekly, but I'll tell you what I mean by weekly in this instance. Okay, this one's going to be on Friday evenings from 9 to 10 p.m. London time. And it's you can register for this particular class that I'm going to tell you about on a per class basis because each one can be taken individually dependent upon your interest. And what it is going to be are 27 different classes on the therapeutic and esoteric secrets of each nakshatra. Okay. And it will teach you how, if you have a planet, or even if you work with house cusps, I do a lot of work with house cusps, or a house cusp in a particular nakshatra, what you're being asked to learn in regard to that particular factor in your horoscope, and how to bring yourself back into alignment with that lesson so that you can ultimately improve your life. The first one is this coming Friday, again from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. Each of these classes is $40 US if you want to register. And I'm going to put the link here in the window. And we'll talk about these both further. If you have any questions about either of these classes that I'm doing, you can also feel free to ask. Okay, so please feel free to put the remainder of your questions in here. So is that bad combust planet if it is benefic? Right. Let's talk a little bit about the concept of planets and factors in astrology in general. Okay. There's no bad planets and there's only good planets. I should say that. Even if you're talking about Saturn, even if you're talking about Mars, they're all there for your evolution. There's just planets that bring challenges and planets that try to bring things with a state of ease, and they don't always succeed with that, right? And I know I say this every time, and I know people probably just feel like, well, most people mean that in the first place, but I really want to break people of the habit of thinking of planets as being bad. Because generally, when you start saying a planet is bad, you start believing a planet is bad. It's like a bad planet, and you dread that planet, and you miss out on the lesson that that planet is trying to teach you. Any any combust planet is going to bring some problems with the particular houses that that planet rules. So Mercury's houses would be somewhat disrupted. The individual would have a hard time connecting to the energy of those houses and energy of everything that Mercury is connected to. So for instance, if Mercury were the Atmakarika, then there would be, disruptions connecting to one's career path, things along those lines. What's really happening with combustion is here's the Earth, right? Here's the sun, and the planet that's combust is behind the sun. So the rays of the planet that is combust are not able to reach the Earth. And so there's some sort of disruption or disconnection with the houses that that particular planet rules. Okay? Let's see what else we've got here. And please feel free to just, continually ask questions. Seems like it's kind of quiet here tonight, unless people pop in a little bit later, but I'm only here for a half hour anyway. So, so please ask a lot of questions, okay? Are there any bad effects of Jupiter in the first house? Well, if Jupiter's debilitated, then yes, there can be, so a lot of it is not just that a planet is considered a gentle planet like Jupiter. It's the degree that that planet is in, determining how productive it is, the dignity of that planet, the Shadbala of that planet. So many different factors go into judging whether a planet is going to be productive or not productive. So if Jupiter's debilitated in the first house, that's not such a good thing. If Jupiter's in a great enemy sign in the first house, that's also not such a good thing. When planets are in the first house, they become an area of focus. They become very prominent in the chart. That's a positive factor because you're going to focus on that energy, right? But it doesn't mean that it's necessarily pleasant. Okay, a good way to understand the pleasant and unpleasant effects of each planet is to learn something about the deep Tadiya Vastas, which are in Brihat Parashara Horus Shastra. They relate to, for the most part, the dignity of the planets. So for instance, when a planet is in neutral dignity, it creates something called Dina Avasta, which means scarce, feelings of scarcity. So as the individual is trying to engage with that planet, the things that it's trying to produce with that planet, it feels like it's just barely able to kind of make it through with that. When a planet is in a friend sign, it's in Shanta Avasta. So the person's at peace with whatever is being produced with that planet. And so even in the instance of that planet not being productive, which is usually, I find, more deeply judged by working with the Baladi Avastas and the Jagradati Avastas, even if that planet is not productive, at least the person's has a certain level of peace with that planet. Okay, so that's how it tends to work in that particular capacity. If you want to, you can look up deep Tadiya Vastas in Brihat Parashara Horus Shastra, and you'll probably learn a little bit about it. Let's see what else we've got here in the question window. Okay, so just a reminder, let me just say this briefly. Starting this Sunday is my Planetary Yogas webinar course. On this course, we're going to learn about Ishta and Kashta, which help to judge the potency of a planet, Shubha and Ashubha Phala, which helps us to judge a planet's good and bad merit. See, I said good and bad too, right? I should kind of like smack myself on the wrist there. And equally a planet's Shubha and Ashubha Digbala, or good and difficult directional strength, right? It's through a combination of these three things that we can judge planetary yogas accurately and determine to what level they will bear their fruits. So on this course, we're going to be learning how to work with that mathematical formula, plus learning all sorts of different yogas on the course. It's a 44-week course. So we're going to be doing a lot of work with yogas, with a lot of different example charts, and learning really how to use yogas to the extreme of their capacity. Yogas really tend to function like astrological signposts. I just did a video on this earlier. What they do is they point you in a certain direction. but they're very powerful things, even though they should never just be taken as an isolated thing. So, in other words, when you're working with yogas, you always want to qualify them properly, and you also want to back them up with other techniques so you can see if you have other factors that are pointing in the same direction. And when you do, that's when you have a really strong case for a prediction. But yogas are very, very important because quite often you can go through and you're looking for an event astrologically. And if you weren't working with yogas, you might completely miss a particular astrological event. But if you work with yogas, you'll see that it strengthens the case for a particular factor. So you can register for this course either by trimester or by making payment in full. If you want to register by trimester, the next trimester fees are not due after your first payment until middle of June. And then there's another payment due in September. And to register by trimester, it's $329 by trimester. But that gives you like weekly classes from like mid-March until like the middle of June, right? So it works out to, I think, somewhere between $10 and $20 a class, really. It sounds like a lot to pay out at first, but it works out cheap in the long run, as you will likely see. So if you're interested in registering for this particular class or just want more information on it, I'm going to put the link to that in the chat window over here, and then I'm going to take another question. Thanks for being patient while I do blatant self-promotion. Okay. Yeah, when a planet is close to a cusp, sometimes it can bring a little bit of the energy of that next sign if it's bordering moving into a new sign rather than, just coming into a sign. If you have other planets in Aquarius, that might be a lot of what's creating that result, though. Okay. Dara Karaka Saturn in fourth Rashi. Okay. Not really sure why you're asking that. I'm confused. But again, just to understand, I'm not here to do chart interpretation for people on your personal birth charts. The reason being, if you're asking me to do that, you're going to get answers and then you'll go away with it. And the answers are not going to be as accurate as they could be, as if I were looking at your entire horoscope. Okay. Atmakaraka is combust the Lagna Lord in the 11th house. Well, it can mean sometimes you may be a little bit disconnected from yourself. What's the result if someone's Atmakaraka is debilitated? It depends on what position that Atmakarak is in. If it's in the 10th house, it can be, a lot stronger. It can take something difficult and be very productive with it. Notice I didn't say make it something good. I said be productive with it because debilitated planets, there's generally a feeling of lowness associated with them. In addition to that, if that planet has its debilitation canceled, it can still be very productive, but still it's a debilitated planet and will still continue to bring those particular feelings. Okay, let's see if anybody else has any other questions. Please feel free to ask away with any astrologically related questions you may have while I take another drink. So if Venus is in the last degrees of Pisces and Vargotama in Navamsha, it will have quality of Aries also. Not always, but there is a tendency sometimes for that to happen, right? Sometimes. Sometimes people's birth times are wrong too, and that can create a lot of it too. So the person who said that, it may be your birth time is off because sometimes it does that. It doesn't always do it. You usually have to have something else that's kind of strengthening the case for that. Okay. What is the positive side of Jupiter in Capricorn? Well, Jupiter in Capricorn is going to feel restricted, certainly. It's going to want to expand, certainly, but the difficult lessons of having its expansion restricted equally teaches good things about practicality. And it also brings somewhat of a spiritual tone to the concept of being practical, right? But a lot of it really depends on the house that Jupiter's in. Okay. And that's just a general concept with it, right? Sometimes a person can be overly optimistic too, and you don't want to be overly pessimistic, but Jupiter in Capricorn can help a person to be more realistic on many levels. Okay, I know a lot of people say when you're past a certain age, look at the Navamsha chart. I'm not a big fan of that. I think each divisional chart is meant to be used for the purpose that it's made for. Okay. The Navamsha chart has a lot of connections to the Rashi chart, mainly because of nakshatras. But at the same time, the Navamsha chart is meant to understand the purpose that we get from life. It's meant to understand our capacity to commit to things, including long term relationships, which is why it deals with marriage on many levels, or the capacity to commit to a spiritual path, which is how it can deal with spirituality as well. But I'm not of the mindset that you should just focus on the Navamsha when you get to be a certain age. Okay. Can I please explain Magha Nakshatra? Well, Magha Nakshatra, and this is interesting because this is along the lines of some of the things that I'm going to do on the weekly classes that I'm going to do. So, just a brief reminder about that, starting a series of weekly classes this coming Friday, right? From 9 to 10 p.m. London time. You can register for each class individually, and it's a class on the esoteric and therapeutic secrets of the nakshatras. And you'll learn how, if a planet is placed in a particular nakshatra, how it really relates to a lesson that the individual is meant to learn in regards to that particular planet. If a house cusp is placed in a particular nakshatra, like the seventh house cusp, for instance, that relates to a lesson the individual is meant to learn through their relationship. So before I ask this Magha question, let me just explain a little bit about how nakshatras work. So you can understand the planets. Planets relate to incarnations of Vishnu on a certain level. So they're like personalities. They're energies that have a personality. They're kind of like living beings walking into certain areas of our life, which are related to the signs. And the permutation of the signs, or I should say, an effect of the signs, is to create houses or specific areas of our lives. What the nakshatras do is they give definition, they give meaning, they give subtlety, right? And they give us symbolism, which helps us to grow our consciousness through the areas of our life that the planets are interacting with, right? Nakshatras, on that level have a very similar function to planets in the fact that they represent a living energy in the chart, a conscious energy in the chart. They're not the same thing, obviously, but they both relate to the concept of consciousness and how we grow with it. Whereas the Rashis wouldn't have anything connected to them if it wasn't the interaction of the planets and the nakshatras, so to speak. Okay, which isn't to say if you have an empty sign, then nothing's going to happen there, because there's always planets influencing different signs. But if you're interested in this particular nakshatra course, then you can sign up for each class individually at $40 a class. I'm going to give you the link for that one too. And here's the link for that. First class is this Friday from 9 to 10 London time, and that class is on Ashwini Nakshatra. Okay, so in talking about Magha Nakshatra, Magha Nakshatra is the first of the Tamasic foundation nakshatras. Okay. So, what's happening through the first 9 nakshatras, which are Ashwini all the way through Ashlesha? That's the primal spark of being coming into form, becoming differentiated, and kind of becoming more condensed, understanding what its mission is here on the planet. When it reaches Magha Nakshatra, that's when the soul is fully encased in its material sheath, so to speak. Okay, so I'll explain that a little more deeply. It's becoming more deeply encased. It's locked into its material bondage. That's a good way to understand it. So what's happening at that point is there is a memory of the inherent divinity that one came from, because that's where we all come from. But there's also a recognition that it's kind of stuck here on the planet, right? And because it's stuck here on the planet and it feels somewhat robbed of its inherent divinity, it becomes somewhat of a rebellious child sometimes and begins to act out against that energy that really wants to help it, which is the parent, right? Which is why Magha Nakshatra is connected to the ancestors, right? So with Magha Nakshatra, there can sometimes be the tendency to ignore the subtle hints that the universe is trying to kind of toss our way. Um, when Magha Nakshatra is functioning in a positive capacity, the person's really going to focus on more deeply tuning in to those signs and signals that the universe is trying to give it in order for it to grow. Generally, most people who have something in Magha Nakshatra, it's a little bit of both. Okay, that's just a very simple thing. Again, on these weekly classes, we'll be going more into depth with it. Okay. So let's see. I can probably stay here a little bit longer tonight, another 20 minutes maybe. Can I talk about Pusha and how planet in that sign has impact like Saturn or Mars? Well, Pusha is not a sign, first of all, but I'm sure you know that. Pusha is a nakshatra. I'm very big on explaining to people that we need to really deeply differentiate the concept between nakshatras and signs. They're completely separate divisions of the sky, but they're joined together for the sake of horoscope interpretation, right? Because the signs are equal portions of the ecliptic, which is the apparent motion of the sun, whereas the nakshatras are equal portions of the heavens that surround the earth, and they don't necessarily have anything to do with the ecliptic, with the exception that they're joined to the ecliptic for the sake of horoscope interpretation, right? So it's probably more accurate not to say that they're signs. They're just different divisions of the heavens. Pusha Nakshatra relates to the concept of sacrifice, right? Sometimes we're here for something, to do something. Only we have in our mind a different set of circumstances that we want to be here for. Okay. And we can try to work against what the actuality of our being is, right? And come up against resistance and find things not always working out well and feel like we're here and we're limited and we're having all these restrictions placed upon us. Or we can recognize that our consciousness is meant for a different journey. And sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the sake of that different journey. Sometimes we may be very deeply willing to make sacrifices for what we feel we should be able to do, but less willing to make sacrifices for the things that we really need to do. Pusha Nakshatra teaches us about making sacrifices for those things that we need to do. Okay, that's just it simply. Okay. So, just very briefly, I know I may be mentioning this a lot, but for those of you who are interested in my courses, there is a Planetary Yogas webinar course that starts this Sunday from 6:30 to 8 p.m. This course is going to run all the way through into 2020. We're going to learn a mathematical calculation that helps to more deeply and accurately assess the level to which planetary yogas will bear their fruits. You can register by trimester, which is $329 by trimester, and your second trimester payment wouldn't be due until June, or you can register by payment in full. It works out roughly to about $20 a week if you register for this course. It's just you have to pay the initial registration fee. Okay, so if you're interested in that particular course, there is a link that I'm posting in the video right about now, and I'll mention it again at the end. Okay, let's see what else we've got going on. Okay, so with somebody's asking a question, which is actually a really good question, but I can't go deeply into depth with it. I can give you some ideas, right? Because a lot of it would revolve around the planets that are in the nakshatras, the planets that are the what I like to call the emissaries of the nakshatras, which a lot of people call the lords of the nakshatras, and a lot of different factors. But in general, when you have a planet that's a deva nakshatra with a planet that's a Rakshasa nakshatra, well, the person can do things that are deeply radical because Rakshasa nakshatras tend to be rather unorthodox in their approach. Okay. And Deva nakshatras, they intend well, but sometimes because their intentions are higher than a lot of other people that they connect with, they feel ostracized or aloof or somewhat lonely. So the person can be like the lonely radical who wants to do good, but is sometimes misunderstood for the good that they do. It's a good way to understand it. Saturn is not debilitated in Cancer. Saturn is debilitated in Aries. Okay. And the dignity of a planet is something different than how a planet functions in a nakshatra. Okay. And really, on balance, the way that nakshatras, that planets are connected to nakshatras, is just for the sake of creating dashas, like Vimshotri dasha or Ashtotari dasha. Um, Different dashas have different planets connected to the nakshatras. That's something to keep in mind. But you can take a look at the well-being of the planet connected to a nakshatra and understand how that nakshatra is going to function. That is still very valid, but it's important to understand that the reason that planets are connected to the nakshatras in the first place is just for the sake of creating nakshatra dashas like Vimshotri dasha. Okay. What should we prefer, moon nakshatra or ascendant nakshatra? Every nakshatra is important for its own reason in connection to the particular factor that it's associated with. So it's not just the fact that the moon nakshatra is more important, or the ascendant nakshatra is important, or that Jupiter's nakshatra is important, or the sun's nakshatra is important. It's the fact that all the nakshatras are important. Okay, it's not that one should take more prominence over another. They just all relate to different things. Okay, let's see what else we've got here. Somebody already asked the question about the Navamsha chart. I'm not going to address that further. Okay. So I don't necessarily agree that we just focus on the Navamsha chart when we reach a certain age. But then again, I approach astrology in a different way than other people may do. Okay. All right. So please feel free to ask some other questions if you want. Please pardon me while I have a drink. Okay, so again, a brief reminder, weekly classes that start this Friday on the nakshatras. You can register for each class individually. It's a 27-week series, but you can register for one class or 27 classes or 16 classes, however many you want to, at $40 a class. The class will run from 9 to 10 p.m. London time. It's on the esoteric and therapeutic secrets of the nakshatras. First class is tomorrow on Ashwini Nakshatra. Here's the link if you want to go register for that. In addition to that, the Planetary Yogas webinar course, teaching you how to work with planetary yogas on a deeply accurate basis using Ishta and Kashtabala, Shubha and Ashubha Phala, and Shubha and Ashubha Digbala, plus working with tons and tons of yogas and example charts. That starts this Sunday. You can register either by trimester or payment in full at this link. Okay, let's see if we have some other questions here. Somebody's saying, is there a way to distinguish spouse's career, Dharakaraka, Rashi, or Navamsha? Looking at the Dharakaraka, working with some techniques that are given by Jay Meany that help to determine the career of an individual by the Rashi that that planet is in, or equally the planet that's in that Rashi, meaning the Dharakaraka, or if it's your own career, the Atmakaraka. And so you can judge the spouse's career by using that particular technique, only substituting what is usually the Atmakaraka for the native's career using the Dharakaraka, and you can understand a little more of the spouse's career, plus other different factors. I like using nakshatras to determine career. Okay, but there is a way to do it. Yeah. Okay. Eighth house will always bring upheaval. Is upheaval necessarily good or bad? Well, if you're stuck in a situation that's not really working out, upheaval can be really good. If you're stuck in a situation that you want to hang on to, upheaval can be really bad, right? So a lot of it depends upon the well-being of the planet that rules the eighth house, as well as planets that are placed in the eighth house. Of course, any planets interacting with that house as well. Okay. Okay. If you're asking questions, people, about your own horoscopes, please don't do that because you're not going to get the most accurate answers if I do that. Okay. Okay, so on this course, Shivam, I'm going to be teaching how to properly assess planetary yogas. It's not something I could tell you in just 5 minutes, right? But there is a very good way to do planetary yogas, and it involves that mathematical permutation I was telling you about. So I highly recommend registering for that course if you really want to know how to work with planetary yogas appropriately, including Viparit Raj Yoga. If you want to learn how to work with that as well, I really recommend registering for the course. It will definitely be worth it. Okay. Ketu and Mula Nakshatra. Okay, there's a misconception that a lot of people have that a planet in its own nakshatra is going to be strong, right? Well, so as somebody was just saying earlier about Saturn in Cancer, if Saturn's in Cancer and Saturn's there with the moon, Saturn's in a great enemy sign. So Saturn's not going to be strong just by being in Pusha Nakshatra. Nakshatras don't work the same way as signs. They're a completely different thing. Okay? They're joined together with signs for the purpose of horoscope interpretation. But you can't always judge a planet in its own nakshatra as being a similar thing to a planet in its own house. It doesn't really work that way. It can be a certain energy of being connected to an environment that it is familiar with. But just because it's familiar, it doesn't mean it's comfortable. It doesn't mean that it's strong, right? So it doesn't work the same way as a planet in its own house. Okay. Okay. Oh, thank you for the person who made the comment at the bottom. Okay. Let's see what else we've got here. Mercury combust in Ashlesha nakshatra. A lot of things in terms of judging nakshatras and how they tend to function relate to, if you can work with them by understanding the Baladi avastas and Jagradati avastas in conjunction with the dignity. Another good way to do it is through the same thing that I'm going to teach in terms of how to judge yogas, which is Ishta and Kashta with Shubha and Ashubha Phala and Shubha and Ashubha Digbala. But Mercury combust in Ashlesha nakshatra, that can create for a lot of scattered energy that really kind of goes off the charts, so to speak, right? It can feel frustrated because it sees a lot of potential, but feels an incongruency in terms of being able to actualize all that potential, or sometimes gets a little bit erratic in terms of doing so. And that's just on a general level, but you'd have to really look at, that Mercury is also is not going to be in the best of strength as well, because it's there with the sun on some levels, right? So, those are all things to look at in that particular capacity. Do I believe impact of Ketu and Rahu go down at a certain age, or healing is addressed? Like in the 40s, people generally, I find, become more familiar with their nodes in the 40s. I do a lot of what are called karmic analysis with people. And generally, when I'm doing a karmic analysis with people who are in their mid 40s or over, they're already familiar with what their nodal axis is trying to tell them. Okay. So, if you have any interest in that particular type of approach to your chart, here's a link to my astrological services page. Okay. So, another few minutes to take another few questions. Let's see what else we've got here. Ways to approach Rahu's house is different as per Rahu in every single horoscope, dependent upon the planets that disposit Rahu, etc. I'm never a big fan of telling people to only do Rahu in their chart. Generally, the nodes are meant to be balanced out. You're supposed to understand the lesson that they relate to and find a way of balancing them. Why do you get different birth chart from Vedic astrology and Western astrology? Well, I think first of all, people need to stop saying there is a concept of Western astrology, but there's also tropical astrology, which is different than sidereal astrology. But there are some people who do Vedic astrology and they use a tropical zodiac, like myself, but I don't do Western astrology. And I know you're not asking me about that, but the concept is that there are two different astrological systems, which are sidereal system is not purely Vedic. There's a lot of there are other systems that use sidereal too, and tropical zodiac is not purely Western because, as I just mentioned, there are people who use a tropical zodiac with sidereal nakshatras. Okay. Okay. Rahu's not exalted. There is no exaltation point of the nodes, in my opinion. Right? Planets Rahu and Ketu are not like the other planets in that particular capacity. They can't be exalted. They can't be in friend sign. They can't be in great enemy sign. They can't even do planetary aspects because they don't have an actual physical form. What we're thinking are planetary aspects of the nodes are actually when a planet crosses the plane of the nodes, so to speak. Or the fact that the nodes are always split apart from each other, right? Okay, but they're not planetary aspecting. They're just two different forces that work in tandem. You can do aspects with the nodes involving Rashi aspects, but not planetary aspects. But back to the exaltation thing, generally Rahu and Ketu take on the dignity of their dispositors primarily. Saturn for Rahu, Mars for Ketu as well, hence the old saying about Rahu behaving like Saturn and Ketu behaving like Mars. And additionally, any planets that they might be joining with in a particular sign, right? So they take on a whole hodgepodge of different energies. So you can't really say that they're one particular dignity. Okay. Okay. So just a brief reminder. Okay. So just quickly because I'm going to have to go. So basically, the Planetary Yogas webinar course starts this coming Sunday, the 10th of March, 6:30 to 8 p.m. Again, you can register in part by trimester at $329 per trimester. If you register for the first trimester before this weekend, you don't have to make another payment until the middle of June. After June's payment, there's not another payment until September, and then you're paid up all the way through till February of the next year. Okay. You can also register in full for that class if you're interested. We'll learn how to mathematically qualify yogas, as well as loads and loads and loads of different yogas, and you can go find some information on that course right here. Okay. In addition to that, I'm starting another class, which is a weekly series. You can register for each class individually on the esoteric and therapeutic secrets of the nakshatras. If you appreciated things that I said about the nakshatras here, that's what that whole class series is going to be about. If you're interested in registering for the first class, which starts tomorrow night on Ashwini Nakshatra, again, 9 to 10 p.m. London time, you can do so at the link I'm going to put in the window now. And as always, if you're interested in scheduling a consultation with me, you can do that at the link I'm going to give you next. And that is to my astrological services page. There we go. Thanks a lot, everybody. I do appreciate you coming here, sharing all your questions, asking really good questions. And I will talk to you all soon. Thanks a lot. And please, as always, do take the very best care of yourself. Bye now.